The moment I saw the gift on our kitchen counter, my hands went cold. It wasn't just expensive, it was dangerous. "Don't open it," I told my husband. He laughed like I was being dramatic, until I showed him the truth. This wasn't a birthday present, it was a loaded weapon, not with bullets, but with the power to destroy our charity, our reputation, and maybe even our freedom. And the people who sent it? My own parents. The snow that night wasn't heavy enough to stick, just enough to dampen the streets and slick the front porch. Ethan and I had just gotten home from Harbor Table, our little non-profit on the harbor that fed unemployed locals and retired vets. It had been a long day, extra shifts because the storm warning kept half our volunteers home. My feet were sore, my hair smelled faintly of coffee and beef stew, and all I wanted was a shower and a quiet dinner. We'd just sat down when the doorbell rang. Not the quick, impatient buzz of a delivery driver, but two deliberate chimes, like whoever left the package wanted us to know it had arrived. There it was, a medium-sized brown parcel on the doormat, the kind you'd get from an online store. A bright happy birthday sticker slapped over the shipping label. I bent down, saw the sender's name, my parents, Robert and Linda Walsh. Ethan grinned. "Your folks remembered." He carried it to the kitchen, set it on the counter, and grabbed a butter knife to cut the tape. Inside was a smaller box, black, sleek, the kind of packaging that says "I'm expensive." He lifted the lid. Inside, cushioned in black velvet, was a watch. Gold bezel, deep blue face, leather strap. Even across the counter, I recognized the brand, Stavros. My pulse stuttered. "Don't touch it," I said. My voice came out sharper than I meant. Ethan froze mid-motion. "What, why?" "Just don't." I grabbed the tea towel from the oven handle and wrapped the box like it might burn my hands. The weight felt wrong, too heavy for a watch, too deliberate. Ethan tilted his head. "Claire, it's just a gift." "No, it's not." I pulled out my phone, took a quick photo, and typed in the serial number. A few clicks later, the listing popped up, $4,200 retail. My chest went tight. $4,000? Ethan let out a low whistle. "Your parents can't afford." He stopped himself, but we both knew the sentence. My parents couldn't afford that, not on their retirement savings. Unless... My mind flashed back 6 months. The new supplier my dad insisted on, Blue Shore Provisions. Better prices, he'd said, locally sourced. And yet we'd had a string of complaints, expired produce, mystery meat, people getting sick. Ethan had been ready to pull the plug. My parents had fought him on it, harder than made sense. Now here was a watch worth more than most of our annual grocery budget for one shelter location. A gift sent to my husband, the man who could approve, or block, a contract. It wasn't just a watch, it was a message. Ethan leaned against the counter, watching me. "You think this is connected?" I nodded slowly. "I think it's exactly what it looks like." He didn't argue. That silence between us wasn't distance, it was recognition. We both knew the ground had shifted. Whatever came next, this wasn't just about spoiled food anymore. This was about trust. And mine, in my parents, was hanging by a single fraying thread. The pantry at Harbor Table always smelled like something honest. Canned tomatoes, flour dust, the faint sweetness of onions and burlap. It was where volunteers ducked in to breathe when the dining room got loud, where Ethan taped up the weekly menu on a clipboard and asked if we could stretch the chili another 20 servings without shortchanging anyone. It was also where the first whispers started, not from people, but from boxes. 6 months earlier, my dad walked in with a folder tucked under his arm and the kind of smile that asked for applause. "Found us a better supplier," he said, dropping price sheets on the steel prep table. "Blue Shore Provisions, local, bulk discounts, organic where it counts." He tapped the numbers with a forefinger. "We'll save 15% across the board." Ethan studied the pages, brow creasing, then smoothing. On paper, it looked solid. "If quality holds, this could help us open a 4th night." My mother chimed in from the sink, rinsing lettuce. "I sampled their stuff. It's good, honey." She didn't look up, but her voice carried an assurance that made the room unclench. We signed. We celebrated with sheet cake and paper plates. The first delivery came with cheerful blue tape and a driver who called me ma'am, like we were a paying hotel. We stacked boxes shoulder high in the pantry, scribbled lot numbers, logged temperatures. Everything looked right. 2 weeks later, a volunteer named Doris tugged my sleeve. "The ground beef, it's a little gray." I checked the label, checked the thermometer, checked my optimism. We browned the meat hard and hoped the cumin would be louder than the doubt. Then came the potatoes, soft spots we had to carve around, then bins of tomatoes that tasted like cardboard, then a case of canned beans without brand labels at all. "Private pack," the invoice said. Private Pack felt like a secret with sticky hands. Complaints trickled in, quiet at first. My stomach didn't like last night's stew, a fisherman told me, rubbing the back of his neck like he was apologizing. A week later, a vet we knew by name didn't show. When Ethan called, his roommate said he was at Mercy Hospital, dehydrated. He only ate with you guys this week, the roommate added. The words sat like ice. Ethan flipped to audit mode, calm at the edges, relentless in the middle. He pulled invoices, matched them against delivery logs, checked weights to the ounce. In the pantry, he opened cans with a pocket knife, sniffed, frowned, kept going. This doesn't track, he murmured, more to the shelves than to me. If they're billing us for grade A, why am I holding mystery meat? We called Blue Shore. A woman with a bright smile in her voice assured us it was a one-off mix-up. She promised a credit. The credit never arrived. I took it to my parents first, trying for soft landing. Something's off, I said, laying photos on the table. Gray beef, dented cans, a box of lettuce stamped 3 days past fresh. My mother's mouth pinched. My father waved a hand, the gesture he used when a TV remote wasn't cooperating. Every vendor hiccups. Don't spook donors over small stuff. Ethan drafted a termination letter anyway. He didn't send it. Not yet. We wanted to be fair. We wanted to be sure. That's when I caught a conversation in the pantry I wasn't meant to hear. I'd gone in for parchment paper. The door was half closed, the hum of the walk-in masking voices until a laughter I knew too well slipped through. My brother Mason. He shouldn't have been back there. He didn't volunteer unless there were cameras around. It's fine, he said, voice low, fast. We just need another quarter. After that, the rollout's done. Another voice, my father's, murmured something I couldn't catch. Mason again. I told you they'll come around. Ethan's not stupid, he's just righteous. Claire will talk him down. I froze, parchment paper in one hand, doorknob in the other. Talk him down from what? From choosing food that wouldn't make people sick? The next delivery arrived with boxes heavier than they should have been and a driver I'd never seen, the invoice stamped net 7 in a red I didn't like. I slid open a case of chicken. The smell hit first. Cold, sour, wrong. I slammed the lid, swallowed hard, and called Ethan. He came running, lifted the corner, winced. We can't serve this, he said. We won't. We moved through the dining room that night like stagehands during a matinee disaster, redirecting, improvising, apologizing with extra cornbread. We made it work because people were hungry and because you do not fail the hungry in this town. After service, we met my parents in the office. Ethan was steady, but there was a thread in his voice I'd only heard once before, the day a donor tried to dictate which families deserved seconds. We're terminating Blue Shore, he said, placing the unsent letter on the desk. Effective immediately. My mother shook her head. Over a bad batch? Do you know how this looks? Like you're impulsive, like you don't respect due process. My father leaned forward, jaw set. Canceling makes enemies, we need friends. We need food that doesn't send people to the ER, Ethan said, so softly it was almost tender. Silence settled, then curdled. My parents left with stiff backs and tight smiles. That night, the pantry felt different. The labels on the shelves were the same, the hum of the freezer unchanged, but something vital had shifted, the invisible line between inconvenience and danger. I stood with my hand on a crate of rice and knew this wasn't about logistics anymore. It was about leverage, and someone close to me was using it. Mason's apartment sat on the 3rd floor of a new build off Commercial Street, all glass corners and brushed steel, the kind of place that comes with a gym key fob and a dog washing station even though nobody there actually picks up after their dog. The lobby smelled like lemon cleaner and new money. A chalkboard near the mailboxes advertised Resident Wine Night, which felt like a joke we were all telling together. He'd texted me a photo the week before, floor-to-ceiling windows, a sliver of harbor, a couch so white it needed its own bodyguard. Closed today. Manifesting works, he'd typed. I stared at the number under the listing. 385,000. For a pre-revenue founder, Ethan had said, your brother scales fast. I brought a houseplant because I was raised to bring something, even when I'm mad. The door clicked open before I could knock twice. Mason stood there in joggers and a designer hoodie that used to exist only in his Pinterest. Sis! He pulled me in, one-armed, eyes flicking over my shoulder like a raccoon watching for raccoon cops. Where's Ethan? At the shelter, I said, inventory. On a Saturday? He laughed too big. Guy needs a hobby. He ushered me inside like he owned the whole floor. The place flashed money, matte black fixtures, a table the color of whiskey, a tiny espresso machine that looked like a race car. The view was postcard perfect, the kind of Maine you show tourists to convince them winter is a myth. I brought you a snake plant, I said, holding it out like a peace treaty. He winced. Low-key trauma from houseplants. I killed 3 succulents last year. He set it on the counter anyway and flipped it so the tag faced the wall. We did the tour, bedroom, office nook, bathroom with rain shower. Startup's cooking, he said, tossing the words like confetti. NDA city, but we're in deep with IP licensing. Heavy hitter partners. I can't name names. I'm happy for you, I said, and meant it in the abstract, the way you're happy for a stranger who wins a raffle. When did escrow close? Week after He stopped. Why? Because your hoodie costs rent, and because 2 weeks ago I overheard you in our pantry whispering about Blue Shore like it was a cousin at Thanksgiving. Just curious. He poured sparkling water into stemware and slid one my way like we were in a commercial for hydration. You look tired. Everything okay at Harbor? Fine. The word stuck. Actually, no, we're dropping Blue Shore. He blinked once, slow. Are you serious? Serious as a recall. He set down his glass too carefully. That's bold. People got sick, Mason. People get sick, he said, mile a minute. Correlation isn't causation. Maybe you should... Stop. I heard my own voice like a door slamming. Don't finish that sentence. He held up both hands, palms empty. His phone buzzed on the counter. The screen lit. Call. BS Logistics. He flipped it over fast, guilt moving faster than gravity. A bright red Net 7 stamped itself across my memory. BS, I said softly. Perfect initials. It's a vendor, he said, for my thing. What thing? The app you can't describe? The partners you can't name? Mason, did you take money to push Blue Shore through? He laughed, a sound with no oxygen. You think I'd be dumb enough to... Claire, come on. The watch showed up last night, I said. From Mom and Dad, Stavros, 4,200 at retail. Arrived right after Ethan drafted the termination letter. You want to tell me what that is? He ran a hand through his hair, smearing nothing. It's a gift. Parents give gifts. Parents who told me they couldn't afford a boiler repair in January. He turned away to the window, the harbor throwing late sun across his shoulders. I'm helping, he said, quieter. That's what you never get. I'm trying to help the family get ahead for once. I stared at the back of his neck, the little scar from when he fell off his bike at 12. With whose money? He spun. You and Ethan don't get to police opportunity because you live like monks. The supplier was fine. You panicked. Tell that to the man in Mercy Hospital. He flinched, barely. He had other issues. So do you, I said. And you've moved them into a very nice apartment. His mouth flattened. The phone buzzed again, and again he didn't answer. Listen, things are in motion. If you tank Blue Shore, people are going to be... disappointed. People? I echoed. Which people exactly? The ones signing anonymous emails? That landed. He swallowed. Just don't do anything rash, he said, reaching like he might touch my elbow and then thinking better of it. Give it a quarter. Let the rollout finish. After that, it won't matter. It matters now, I said. It matters every time someone eats what we serve. I left the plant and the glass half full. In the lobby, a neighbor in a puffer vest held the door and told me to have a blessed day. Outside, the wind off the water cut clean through my coat. I stood there, staring at the kind of horizon postcards promise, and felt it. The click of something locking into place. The watch, the invoices, the way my parents argued like their names were on the contract. And now, Mason in his View apartment telling me timelines like a project manager for people who never show up on paper. On the walk back to the car, I called Ethan. He answered on the first ring. How's the new palace? He asked. Polished, I said, and very loud for a place so quiet. You okay? Not yet, I said, unlocking the door. But I know what we're up against. The watch didn't leave our kitchen counter for 24 hours. Not because we were sentimental, but because neither of us wanted to touch it again. It sat there in its black velvet box, swaddled in a dish towel like something radioactive. Every time I walked by, I caught myself glancing at it the way you glance at a shadow under the bed, just to make sure it hadn't moved. By Monday morning, Ethan and I had made our decision. No more hesitating, no more, maybe it's just a misunderstanding. We were done. We didn't stop at the reception desk when we got to Harbor Table. My parents were already in the office, Mom with a browser window open but eyes on her phone, Dad scrolling through a spreadsheet like it was wallpaper. Neither looked up when we entered. Ethan set the watch down on the table between them, the way a detective in a movie might slide a gun across an interrogation room. I placed 2 envelopes next to it. Termination letters, I said. Effective immediately. 1 month severance. No further involvement with Harbor Table. Mom's lips parted like she'd been mid-breath and forgot how to finish. You're firing us? Yes, I said, exactly that. Dad shoved his chair back so hard the legs squealed against the linoleum. "We're your family." "Not in this capacity," I said. "You have no idea what you're doing," he snapped. "No, Dad," I replied, my voice steady in a way that surprised even me. "I know exactly what I'm doing." That's when I pulled out my phone and showed them the Stavros listing. $4,200 retail. Want to explain where this came from? They didn't. "You couldn't pay your heating bill in January, I paid it. But you could buy this for Ethan?" Mom folded her arms. "Generosity isn't a crime." "No," I said, "but bribery is." And then they started talking over each other, the way people do when they're trying to build a wall of sound instead of answering a question. Dad muttered about business relationships, Mom about supporting Mason. That was the crack, the one phrase that changed the whole picture, supporting Mason. "What does he have to do with this?" I asked. The silence that followed was an answer all by itself. Ethan stepped forward. "People got sick, one ended up in the hospital, and you're telling me you still stood by that supplier?" Dad's eyes went hard. "Do you want to scrape by forever? This was an opportunity." "You put the charity at risk for a payout," I said. They didn't deny it. We walked out together, Ethan holding the watch at arm's length, me with the envelope still warm from their unopened defiance. I thought that would be the end. I was wrong. The first hit landed 2 days later, a post on a local Facebook group. "Did you know the director of Harbor Table drives a car worth more than your donations? Ask him where the luxury watch came from." Then another, and another. Photos of the watch, blurry, grainy, but unmistakable, circulated in community forums, anonymous accounts tagging our donors, insinuating that Harbor Table was a front for skimming. By the end of the week, 2 sponsors had paused their monthly support. A fundraiser we'd been planning for months went eerily silent. No confirmations, no callbacks. Our volunteer coordinator, Marcy, found one of the nastier posts and cried in the staff kitchen. An email arrived in the general inbox. "Reinstate Blue Shore. Restore your parents' positions. The attacks stop." I read it 3 times. By the 4th, I was laughing, not because it was funny, but because the brazenness was almost art. Ethan didn't laugh. "This is extortion," he said quietly. "They think they can wait us out," I said. "They think we'll fold to make the noise go away." He looked at me for a long second. "We're not folding." "No," I said, "we're not." But even as I said it, I knew the next wave was coming. Not from strangers, but from someone who shared my blood. And when it hit, it wouldn't just be noise, it would be personal. The email didn't vanish from my mind. It sat there like a live coal, even after I deleted it from the inbox, then from the trash. Every word was burned into me. Reinstate Blue Shore. Restore your parents' positions. The attacks stop. That weekend, Ethan and I didn't talk about anything else. Not over coffee, not while folding laundry, not even when we tried to watch a movie. It was there in every pause, every sigh, this knowledge that the people targeting us weren't strangers, weren't faceless internet trolls. They were ours, my family. By Monday morning, I knew what had to be done. "Let's just take it all in," Ethan said. "Everything, the whole trail." So we did. We started in the office, pulling every contract, every invoice tied to Blue Shore provisions. Ethan laid them out across the conference table like crime scene photos, delivery logs, order forms, packing slips. We circled the substitution codes, the inflated weights, the private pack entries that masked what was really inside the boxes. From the volunteer coordinator's desk, we collected incident reports, notes on food complaints, hospital visits, people sent home sick. In the pantry, I snapped fresh photos of the dented cans and yellowed lettuce, because no one could accuse us of exaggerating. Then we pulled the emails, my parents pushing for the supplier, dismissing complaints, warning us about business relationships we'd ruin if we canceled. We saved screenshots of the Facebook posts, the anonymous accounts, the blurry photo of the Stavros watch, the hashtags accusing us of theft. By the time we were done, my hands smelled like paper and metal, like the inside of a filing cabinet that had been holding its breath. Ethan sat down at the head of the table. "This is enough," he said, "more than enough." The next morning, we walked into the Portland Police Department, our evidence in 2 battered banker's boxes. The desk officer didn't flinch when we said the word extortion. She waved us toward an interview room with plain walls and a table that wobbled at one corner. Detective Harris came in with a notepad and a voice that could cut through fog. "Start from the beginning," she said. So we did. We told her about the supplier, the bad food, the complaints, about the pushback from my parents, about the watch, about the Facebook campaign, about the email. She took notes in a neat block print. When we finished, she set her pen down. "You're not the first," she said. "Blue Shore's been on our radar. You've given us more than we had before." There was no moment of triumph, no swelling music, just the scrape of her chair as she stood, the quiet assurance that she'd be in touch. But as we stepped out of the station, something shifted. Not relief, yet, but direction. Like the tide pulling back before a bigger wave. 3 weeks later, the bigger wave hit. Harris called to tell us the arrests were happening that morning. Blue Shore's so-called CEO, real name, Peter Lasky, was in cuffs before noon. My father and mother were picked up at their house, my father still in the sweatshirt he wore to harbor table shifts, my mother's hair half-pinned like she'd been interrupted mid-denial. And Mason, my brother, was served at his precious Harbor View apartment. He wasn't cuffed, but his face made the front page anyway, under the words charged in fraud probe. The court filings laid it bare. Blue Shore had funneled $18,000 to my parents in exchange for keeping the contract alive, plus the Stavros watch, timed perfectly to sway Ethan. Mason had used a chunk of that money as the down payment on his condo. Ethan and I read every page twice. It was worse than we'd imagined, and exactly what we'd feared. That night, sitting in the dim light of our kitchen, I realized something. The attacks had been their last bargaining chip, their final way to make us bend. But by turning everything over, we'd taken away their leverage. "They can't touch us now," Ethan said, his voice low but steady. And for the first time in months, I believed him. 6 months later, the headlines had moved on. The front page that once carried my family's mugshots was now filled with summer festivals, fishing tournaments, and city council squabbles about parking. But at Harbor Table, the ripple of what happened was still felt every single day. Only now, it was in a way that made the air lighter, the work steadier. Robert and Linda Walsh, my parents, were serving 20 months in federal prison for conspiracy, fraud, and bribery. Their savings were gutted to pay fines totaling over $50,000. In the town where everyone knew everyone, there were no more neighborly nods at the post office. People crossed the street. Their names became a shorthand for "don't try that here." Mason got off lighter, probation, 200 hours of community service, and the loss of his Harbor View apartment when it was seized as part of the restitution. He was assigned to work at a food bank on the other side of town. I heard through someone that he didn't last a week before the supervisor had to remind him to serve the people before himself. Blue Shore Provisions collapsed completely, their license revoked, their so-called CEO sentenced to a year in prison. The glossy website vanished overnight, leaving behind nothing but cached pages and a cautionary tale whispered at nonprofit conferences. Don't let greed through the loading dock. And us? We were cleared, not just in some quiet legal filing, but publicly. The State Department of Charitable Oversight issued a statement naming Harbor Table as a victim of the scheme, not a participant. That mattered more than I expected. It was like someone finally scrubbed the stain off our name. Our donors returned. The ones who'd paused donations sent them back with notes that said things like, "We knew you were telling the truth." Volunteers came back in full force, bringing friends. The board voted, unanimously, to reaffirm Ethan's leadership. I'll never forget that meeting. No speeches, no drama, just a row of raised hands and Ethan's shoulders lowering in a way I hadn't seen in months. One Tuesday morning, I walked into the kitchen at Harbor Table, and it hit me how much had changed. The radio was playing something silly and upbeat. Fresh bread lined the cooling racks. Someone had spilled soup on the counter and was laughing while wiping it up. Marcy was teaching a new volunteer how to chop onions without tears, though both of them were crying anyway from the smell. It was noisy, messy, alive. And it was ours. I thought before all this that turning in my own family would haunt me. I imagined waking at 3 a.m., hearing my mother's voice accusing me of betrayal, feeling that gnaw of guilt. But I don't. I sleep better than I did before. Because every day I walk into this place and see people sitting down to a hot meal, sometimes the only one they'll have that day. I hear the thank yous that aren't rehearsed. I see the kind of gratitude that has nothing to do with PR and everything to do with survival. I did what was right. Not what was easy, not what was painless, but right. And there's a clarity in that I can't explain until you've lived it. I haven't spoken to my parents since. They sent me a letter from prison. It's still sealed in the top drawer of my desk. I'm not saving it out of anger. I'm saving it because I don't need to open it. That chapter is over. Now, when I lock up after the last meal service, I pass the empty counter where the watch once sat. I remember how heavy it felt, how wrong. And I realize it doesn't matter anymore. The weight is gone. Justice happened, Harbor Table is still here, and so am I, lighter, steadier, and finally at peace. Sometimes doing the right thing feels like standing alone in the cold, your hands empty, your heart heavy. But if you hold your ground, you'll see it, the moment the storm passes and the light comes back. Walking away from people you love when they've chosen the wrong path, that's not weakness, that's courage. Because protecting what's good, what's honest, is worth more than keeping the peace at any cost. If you've ever faced that choice, know this: you are not alone, and you are stronger than you think. And here, on Sweet Revenge, Happy Ending, we share these stories not just to tell what happened, but to remind you you can reclaim your peace, rebuild your life, and still write your own ending. So if this story moved you, subscribe, join our community, and keep standing for what's right, even when it's not easy. Because the right ending is always worth fighting for.